Today we are at the Heartland Federal Partners Grant Writing Workshop. This is the third session in our series, and we are joined today by a great panel of speakers to start off with a lot of tips for you and overview of different programs. And so we're real excited to just kind of jump into things here. We got a few technical pieces that we want to just go over to start as reminders. So some technical notes. If you are having any difficulties throughout the process today, you can certainly call us and we will make sure to help you out with that, or you can send an email. We will have all of the presentations from today's series available on the KSU TAB work website where you registered. And so I believe that those are even already maybe posted. If not, things will be done right afterwards, as well as the recording for the events are also there. And in case you missed one of the first two sessions of the series, you can catch that information at that same location. So if don't worry about taking frantic notes, we have you covered and everything will be available for you at that link. So presentations are already there. Let's see here. A couple Zoom basics for you. I think most everybody, but just in case, a nice little reminder. Remember to keep yourself muted and video off. I think we have kind of controlled that for the most part, just to help with presentation mode for everybody as we are going through things. Use the chat to ask any questions that you might have. Also, please be sure to change your name if needed so that we know who's registered. And so if you're calling in or using a different phone number, make sure to change your name so that we know that you are registered as yourself for this event. So take a moment to do that if needed. And again, use the chat for questions throughout the presentations. We'll also have some times for question and answer at the end of the session today. So our agenda for today, we have 3 sessions that we will be working through. The first one is just a general overview of some of the various programs, including the EPA job training, USDA programs, and HUD programs. We're joined by Joanne Scheel, Flora Chavez, and Alma Marina Alam for those presentations. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion from some of our communities that have had successful applications. And so they're going to share some of their experiences and tips. Jessica Pressler, Jen McCohen, and Haley Jones Sides will be presenting on each of those various grant proposals. And then finally, we will end with some technical assistance information available about KSU TAB's assistance, and then from Wichita State Heartland Environmental Justice Center, which is the TIC-TACs. So we have a great workshop here planned for this afternoon, and we are excited to get things going. And so we're going to have a start with Joanne. Might just take a couple minutes as some people are still rolling in here. We'll get going and get things started. So I'm going to stop sharing mine.
All right. Share mine. Whoops. Did that share?
We are good. Yes.
Is it there?
Yep, all good.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Sabine, for inviting me to this workshop. I'm Joanne Scheel. I'm the Deputy State Director for Nebraska, USDA Nebraska Rural Development. So I am going to talk today about writing a grant and what makes a good grant application. But before I get started, I have to tell you just a little bit about USDA Rural Development. So USDA Rural Development offers various programs for rural communities. So we have over 40 different programs to help rural communities with all kinds of issues that they may be looking for and help. So we have our single family housing program where we offer guarantee loans, direct loans for applicants, and also a housing repair project as well. I don't know if many of you are familiar with guarantee loan programs, but a guarantee loan program is where you as the applicant go to the bank. The bank comes to us, rural development, for a guarantee on a loan. So we actually work with the bank, and the loan is essentially between you and the bank, but we support the lender on the other end so that if something does happen to the loan, the federal government does come in and help pay for that loan. So that's a guarantee loan. Direct loan is when you would come directly to us. We also have a community programs where we do projects such as we can do fire trucks, we can do police cars, we can do community centers, we can do sirens in communities. So anything that again essentially makes a community, we can help out with projects. In addition to that, we also have a water and wastewater program where we are working with people's water supplies and also their wastewater systems. And then we have the business programs. That's where we work with businesses in the rural areas. We can do guarantee loans there, also direct loans and grants. I am going to touch a little bit on our Rural Energy for America program. That's one of our programs that has been funded through the IRA. So I wanted just to give you a little bit of information about that. But first, as I said, we are only working rural areas with USDA rural development. There are other guarantee loan programs out there, basically SBA. SBA can work in any place in the doesn't matter the area, but we are restricted to rural. So that means the population of that community has to be less than 50,000. And there is a determination tool here that will allow you to look up your address of where you want to locate to see if it meets the rural definition. So I put those on there as well. So the Rural Energy for America program this year with the IRA funds, we have received, gosh, I think it's like 5 times as much money as we've ever had in the past, something like that. It's wild. We are really excited about this. We are really helping a lot of businesses upgrade to improve their energy efficiencies in their buildings or to put in renewable energy. So we are now in quarterly deadlines. Rural efficiency or energy efficiency projects can be lighting in your facility. It can be heat, cooling, ventilation, fans, automated controls, insulation, new doors, new roof, anything that's going to improve the energy efficiency of your project. Renewable energy, of course, is that would be the solar, the wind, can be anaerobic digesters, geothermal. Those would be considered renewable energy. These projects can typically, like I said, let me back up. Sorry, the grants will pay for 50% of the total project cost. This I should have updated, and I realized it's wrong, but we do pay up to 50% of the total project cost. So if there's a cost over $10,000, we would pay $5,000, not the $2,500. And we can pay up to a maximum now of $1 million on a grant. So big differences with the IRA funds. Like I said, we're excited about it. Typically in Nebraska, we were doing 45 projects a year. And this year, I think we're going to be well over 200. So I wanted to let you know that because you may be working in areas or you may yourself have a business in a rural area that needs some help. So if you do, let us know. All right. So my real purpose for being here today is to help you write a super duper grant and to let you know what it takes for a grant reviewer to consider your grant eligible for funding. Basically, today I'm going to discuss with you knowing the purpose of the grant, knowing eligibility requirements, and then tips and tricks for writing a successful grant application. Every grant has a very specific purpose. So when Congress passes the budget and puts in money for a grant, that grant has a very specific purpose. So like I just talked about for our Rural Energy for America program, the grants that are allowed under there, there's a very specific purpose. For us, has to be in a rural area. It has to be in a population of under 50,000, and it has to meet the criteria that was set up for that particular grant. So know that and understand what the purpose of the grant is that you are applying for. These regulations are covered in either the notice of funds available or the notice of solicitation of funds, of applications. So you will find those in the Federal Register when the grant comes out. It will have either the NOSA or the NOFA listed there, and it's going to tell you what that purpose is of that grant. This is where you have to read very carefully, make sure the grant fits your needs and what you're looking for. Understand the purpose of that grant, understand if you're eligible to apply, understand if your project is eligible. If you have any questions at all, call. And I always tell people this, don't try to figure it out on your own, because we all know a lot in federal government about what our grants are for. And when you're trying to figure that out on your own, it can be pretty difficult. So we also may be able to show you how to tweak your grant so that it is eligible for our funds. So always keep that important in front of you to call the person and ask some questions. I'm going to, just to show you what a typical NOFA, NOSA would look like when it comes out in the Federal Register. There's going to be all kinds of information in that notice. And basically it's going to go through these items and give you very specific direction as to what's needed. So it's going to tell you what the total amount of the funds available are, what the due date of the applications are, how to submit, as well as an overview of the program. There's going to be a federal awards information. So those are the details about the grant. How is it going to be scored? What are the eligibility requirements? What's kind of timeline? That's all going to be involved in that. The application and submission. How do you submit your grant? Does it have to go through grants.gov, or can you submit it to the local office in your area? This is the one that everyone just loves. Not really, but the Systems for Awards Management, SAM, and your UEI dollar, you have to register for SAM now for grants. So something that takes some time, something that you may need some help with. So if you are thinking about applying for a grant, these are the kind of things you can get ready ahead of the grant application. And of course, the NOSA will tell you submission dates and times. It may say the grants are due on November 30th by midnight. It's going to be very specific. And then it's also going to say Eastern time, not Central time, not Pacific time. So it's going to give you very specific deadlines as to when that grant is due. Other things that will be in the NOSA or the NOFA will be the criteria that your grant will be scored on. This is really important to pay attention to, because if you're going to write a grant, this is what you want to write to. This is where the points are scored. So basically, most of the time grants are looking at what is the nature of your proposed venture. Are the people who are carrying out this project, are they qualified? It's going to ask you what kind of commitment you have, what kind of support you have, and if you can also send in letters of commitments from people in your community or whoever that you're working on this project with. There are other topics depending on the grant that will also tell you how this selection process is going to happen. It will give you all the additional paperwork and forms that will need to be filled out. And it will tell you the requirements of accepting federal dollars, which is also very important. Right now, well, always, if you are accepting federal dollars and you are putting in buildings or changing up a building and putting on an expansion, you will most likely have to go through an environmental review. We do look at the fact to make sure that you're not in a wetland or there is not a floodplain where you are looking to build your building. We're going to review all of that. If it does happen that your site is in that, then we're going to ask you to do the risk mitigation necessary so that your plant or facility is protected. I just wanted to show you, this is our value-added producer grant. This is what a typical table of contents will look like when you're looking at a grant application. So it's going to kind of go through and it's going to lay this out for you. So, you know, there's usually a template involved in our grants. So this is what the template will look like. It's going to tell you what all those required standard forms are, so you can print those off and include them. It's going to give you any optional forms that might be necessary. It's going to go through this. First, section 1 is the summary. Section 2 is going to be your write-up of your executive summary. It can get very detailed here. It can tell you that you can only have 500 words in your executive summary, and that you have to use Times New Roman font 12 size. I mean, it's going to be very, some of them can be very specific with that information. So if it does have that information, please don't write 1,000 words. Please don't put it in a 9 size font where we can't read it. It will kick it off. So again, make sure you read those instructions and that you know what they're requesting of you and asking. A lot of times in the beginning of the grant, it's going to ask about your citizenship. It's going to ask about your legal responsibility to carry out the duties of the grant. We always ask if there's any outstanding federal judgments that we should know about. In addition to that, we do check a site that we have to make sure that that's not true. If you're working with alcohol or tobacco, we have to have the regulations, and we have to know that you're doing that, so that we can again make sure that you're meeting all the requirements. But again, this is just kind of a typical layout for what a table of contents would look like in a grant. Okay, so that's just the first part. Now you know you're eligible, you know your project's eligible, and now the fun really begins, and that's the writing of the grant. Most of the time, there's 2 major parts of the grant that I tell people to really pay attention to. That is the budget. So how do you plan on using the money? And making sure you answer all those criteria questions that are in that NOSA-NOFA. That will explain to the reviewers what you want to do with the funds and how you're going to use those funds. Again, I go back to, if you have questions on any of this, make sure you call the contact that's listed in that NOSA-NOFA, or get to someone that can help you answer those questions. That's really important, because most of the time I can answer a question in a 30-second call where it may take you an hour to try to figure it out. So call the person. Here's what typically we expect when we see a budget. We're going to ask you to list what that task name is. We're going to ask you to describe it. We want to know who the responsible party on your team is that's going to carry out that activity. We want to know what the start date is, what the end date is, how much you're requesting from grant dollars, and how much of your own dollars you're going to put into that project. So this table pretty much can lay all of that out in a simple, easy to read format for the reviewers. In this particular situation, I always tell people, pay attention to that start date and that end date. Don't tell me that your whole project, if you have 7 different tasks, they're all going to start on the very same day and they're all going to end on the very same day. It makes me believe that you haven't really thought this through too much. So little things like that can be things that trick the reviewer into saying, I'm not really too quite sure about this particular grant application. So like I said, pay attention to those things. Let the reviewer know that you have thought this out. Let the reviewer know what you're expected to do with the grant dollars. In this particular example, I just put in marketing, my task name. Maybe that first step is you're going to hire a marketing firm to assist with your advertising, and the responsible person is Jane Doe on your staff. The next one step 2 might be, okay, now you're going to place ads in relevant magazines, media. Maybe the responsible person there is Ryan, but notice I have 2 different dates on there. So after I hire the marketing firm, then I'm going to give this responsibility to Ryan, and he's going to be responsible for overseeing the ad placement. Here's an example of a criteria, just one of the criterias that might be in a grant. This one is project personnel, and I will tell you, this is one that often messes people up. Because there's a lot of things in this particular criteria. So this one is asking you to identify everyone that's responsible for managing or performing that project. Now, back in the budget, if we go back to that, I have Jane Doe and Ryan Smith's name in here. When I get to this, I better make sure that those 2 names are in this qualifications of the project personnel. You might have a contractor in the budget. Again, make sure that contractor then is in this write-up. They tell you very specifically what they want. So they want to know what's their role, what's their responsibility, what's their availability to the project. That's important. Maybe they can only spend 10% of the time, and that's not bad. We just need to know what's their availability to this project. If it is a consultant or if you're hiring someone and don't have that person selected yet, make sure you quantify in that description of that project personnel what that person's duties will be. And you can say they haven't been hired yet, that's fine. But we want to know what qualities are you looking for? What are the quantities that you're looking for in that person? You want to add in things that are like strong credentials. They've been working in, this is if you're applying for a meat grant or a meat processing grant, you want to say that this person has worked in the industry for 10 to 12 years. If that's there, you might want to say that they have a degree in engineering or whatever their degree is. You want to talk about their availability. They're going to work 100% of their time on this grant, or maybe they're going to work 20%. So you can see from the points awarded that if you don't address all of the staff, it's going to drastically reduce your points. So again, this is a small detail that most people just think, oh, I can list their names and I know what they're going to do, but they don't necessarily describe it in detail to the reviewer. So I wanted to show you that as one of the criteria, just so that you would see what is expected of you to write about this particular criteria in this case. So here's some grant writing tips. Understand what the grant's for, talked about that, and who is eligible. Know how you want to use those grant funds before you ever even look at the grant itself. And be able to explain to any reviewer who is reading your grant application what you're going to use those grant funds for. Follow all the directions. So under each one of those criteria, if it lists 10 things that it wants, then put all 10 things in that. And I often do it in headings. So I'll say education, and I'll put down what the person's education is. Experience, and I'll put down what their work experience is. Prepare your budget. We get lots and lots of math errors. So it's hard for us to decide whether the math error is because it's too high or too low. So prepare your budget, go over that budget several times, make sure that your math adds up. Use Excel, it helps a lot. And then make sure that your budget supports the objectives that you're proposing to accomplish. So budget and narrative should match. Don't tell me that you slaughter 5,000 cows in one place and then in another place say you slaughter 3,000. Again, I can't guess as to which one of those is right. So every budget also has a narrative, and you want to explain yours with strong justifications as to why you're requesting the funds. Pay close attention to all the details. Did you answer everything the grant asks you? Write the grant for someone who has no idea what your business is, or may not even really know that much about businesses. That's a good way and a good test to make sure that you've explained yourself in a way that the grant reviewer is going to know what you are looking for and what you want. Have a friend, and I always say a very good friend, because they may not be your friend after you ask them to do this, but no, ask them to review your grant for you. It's a great way to make sure you don't have any incomplete sentences in there, your punctuation's right, they understand what you're saying, that you didn't mess up somehow with cutting and pasting and putting something in the wrong place. Yeah, those are things that friends can catch for you. Don't procrastinate. Writing a grant at the last minute. Writing a grant is not that much fun. I'm just going to say that. And writing it at the last minute with no time, that's really not fun. So if you don't want to spend up all night working on a grant application, get your timeline in place when you're going to write the grant and spend some time doing it. Most agencies, we do this a lot. Most agencies will review your grant for you if you give them time. And we will, I'm always willing to look over someone's grant that is applying for a grant from us, and let them know if there's things that I think that could strengthen the grant or help the grant. I can't write it for you, but I can definitely give you some good suggestions. So if you're not procrastinating and you have plenty of time, that's some of the things you could do. You can ask the person if they would look over your grant for you and give you any suggestions. Use all those lifelines out there. Your friend to review it, call the agency who's sponsoring it, ask questions, make sure you understand the grant, make sure you understand, make sure they understand what you're writing for and what you're applying for. It's not, like I said, it's not fun writing a grant and the last thing you want to do is write a grant and then have someone tell you, well, you weren't even eligible for that grant. So make sure that you have all of those points, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure everything's in place. Phew. Okay. I feel like I just talked a whole lot there. Sorry. I hope I didn't go over my timeline, but here's my contact information. If you ever have any contact or ever have any questions, I'm more than glad to answer those. And I think my presentation will be uploaded to the site, right, Michelle?
It is. Yep. Everything is already up there and your perfect timing. So
all right.
Thank you
Great.
for all those wonderful tips. Yeah, no, great information. Those tips are extremely valuable. So yes, thank you. And if you have questions, anybody has questions, we will be doing those again at the end. So thank you for the presentation, Joanne. We're going to turn it over next to Flora. Flora is from the Housing and Urban Development, Healthy Homes Lead Hazard Control division, talking about grants there. So we're going to let Flora kind of take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me present at your workshop. As Michelle stated, my name is Flora Chavez, and I am an enforcement analyst assigned to Region 7 in the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes. A little bit about our office. It's a fairly new office. We were established by Congress in 1991 as the Office of Lead-Based Paint Abatement and Poison and Prevention. And in 1999, Congress expanded the office's mission to cover housing-related health and safety hazards more broadly. So our office provides funding to state and local governments to reduce lead-based paint hazards and provides funds to state, local, and tribal governments and nonprofit organizations to mitigate housing-related health and safety hazards. We also enforce the lead-based paint housing regulations and provide public outreach and technical assistance. So what is a healthy home? There are 8 healthy home principles. We want to keep it dry. We want to make sure that, the roof is intact, and so we're not getting any kind of leak from outside. We want to make sure that the plumbing is in good repair, so we're not having any internal leaks. We want to keep it clean. We want to control any kind of dust or clutter. We want to keep it safe. It's not just about locking doors. It's also about keeping poisons out of the reach of children, making sure that there's no tripping hazards, or installing smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, as well as keeping fire extinguishers on hand. We also want to keep it well ventilated. We want to make sure our bathroom fans are working. We're talking air quality here, being able to make sure the windows open and close, to be able to have good air quality inside. We also want to keep it pest-free. The pests are looking for food and water and shelter. So we want to make sure that they can't get in. So sealing cracks or any kind of openings throughout the homes. We want to make sure that our food is in pet-resistant containers. And we want to make sure we're using the least toxic pesticides, such as boric acid powder. We want to keep it contaminant free. Like I said, we are at the Office of Lead Hazard Control. So we want to make sure that in any of the pre-1978 homes, any kind of deteriorated paint is taken care of. We also, radon is a concern. It's a naturally occurring gas that can cause lung cancer. So we want to make sure, we can do radon testing and radon mitigation. We also want to keep it maintained. So we do the minor repairs like the caulking around the sinks, stuff like that. If we address it at the small level, then it won't turn into a big mold issue underneath the sink. So we want to address them before they become bigger problems. We also want to keep it thermally controlled. We don't want to have any kind of exposure or anything like that. So those are our 8 healthy home principles. So what is unhealthy housing? Like you can see on this slide, we discussed lead, any kind of pests, carbon monoxide, radiation, asbestos, trip and fall hazards, any kind of poisons or anything like that. Those sorts of hazards can lead to any kind of health problems. The lead can actually, if the kids under 6 get into any kind of lead-based paint, it does affect their brain and can have hyperactivity, reduced IQ, and of course the air quality, we're talking asthma. Radon with the radiation, where, you know, I already brought up cancer. So we want to reduce the hazards to lower the health effects. That also has an impact on the economy. The costs to the individuals, the time off, you know, lifelong health problems, socialization problems, stuff like that. So why does it matter? Like I said, it helps children and other vulnerable populations reach their full potential. It can free up expenses that you would spend on healthcare, and it saves money and lives. So our office has several different grant programs. I'm not going to read the entire slide, but right now our open NOFO is our lead hazard reduction capacity building grant. And I'll get more into that a little bit later. But all of our grants go through grants.gov. Like Joanne had stated, you do have to register for SAMS for that. So make sure you have an updated SAMS registration to be able to go through grants.gov. And our grants actually do fund the positions required to run the program. So that's something to keep in mind. So what can these grants do for you? They support the development and implementation of state and local healthy home programs, which of course furthers affordable housing, and it demonstrates that providing safe and healthy environments is feasible. It also promotes public and private, partnerships to align common outcomes. And it creates lead safe and healthy homes. Oops. So we do transform communities by reaching the vulnerable populations, by identifying any kind of health and safety hazards, and assist in any of the remediation with our funding. So just a few facts on healthy home investments. For every dollar spent on asthma reduction, there is a return of between $5.30 and $14. And for every dollar spent on radon mitigation, there's a return of $4.95. And for every dollar spent on lead hazard control programs, there's a return of between $17 and $221. That's where we see our biggest return on investment. Again, reducing the healthcare costs, increasing school attendance, increasing employment attendance, increase income due to attendance, and of course, fewer deaths. So our grants have been used on internal and external stuff, single and multifamily. So I just wanted to throw in a couple of before and after photos. Where this was a lead-based paint grant that did the exterior and the roofing as well. And this one sort of did the same thing in the siding. They can also be used, like I said, multifamily and single family properties. So what does applying look like, and who can apply? For our grants, like I said, it's state, county, and federally recognized tribal governments, any units of local government, nonprofits having 501c3 status. We also offer grants that are open to independent school districts and private institutions of higher education. Those would be like the technical studies grants that I believe that K-State has that one. So you would want to go to grants.gov, and you can see I have the keyword search for HUD. Like I said, currently we have the capacity building NOFO out. So you would search for HUD, and it is open until January 4th of 2024. So when you click on the Federal Register number, it goes into the grant opportunity. It does open to the synopsis page. You want to go to the related documents to be able to download the NOFO and all of the information, supporting documents. So the front page of the NOFO looks like this. And as you scroll through the pages, what you want to do is read the entire NOFO. Then you want to reread the entire NOFO. It will tell you what you need to do. It will tell you all of the requirements. It will tell you how you will be rated. It will give you everything, all the information that you need. Like Joanne was stating earlier, it also has the name of the person who you can contact regarding any sorts of questions. So you, like I said, you want to read, then reread the instructions. You want to read and reread the rating factors. It will break down by points, how many points per rating factor. When you do apply for these, you want to answer the questions in the order that they are asked. As a reviewer myself, it is easier. You want to make it as easier on the reviewer as possible. You're having rating factor 1, 2, 3, and preference points in this one particular. So you want to answer them in 1, 2, 3, and the preference points at the end. And I didn't put all of I would have taken too much time if I would have put snippets of the individual rating factors, but it goes after this snippet that I took, it does break down each rating factor and what is inside each rating factor. So like I said, you want to respond to the questions in the order that they are asked. And when I say that it's broken down of what you need, this is part of rating factor 1. It will tell you that you must include your application, your project must include a minimum a project director who is dedicated to data and a dedicated day-to-day program manager. It's not just going to tell you that the personnel that you need, it's also going to say that the program manager must dedicate 75% of his or her time to the proposed project. So you need to state in your application, Joe Smith is our project director. He will dedicate 10% of his time to the project. Joanne Smith is going to be the program manager. She will be dedicating 75% of her time to the proposed project. You'll want to attach any sorts of resumes. You want to describe how your program is going to start up during the first 90 days. You want to describe how you'll administer the program. You want to discuss how funding will flow from your organization to the contractors that are doing the work. One of the things that I have seen as a reviewer is people do not provide, or applicants do not provide, the current example of financial reports. Something like that will get you dinged some points in some sort of way, half a point to a point, maybe even two, depending on how well the application is written. So you want to provide all the information that is requested. We're asking for standard forms, SF-424s. We're asking for the disclosure reports. You need to make sure to attach your resumes and make sure that if there is a page limit, that you are within that page limit, and that will be stated in the NOFO. So real quick, and I don't think anybody was expecting this, but we have a little bit of a test here. So what I'm piggybacking off of what Joanne had stated, you want to phone a friend, call somebody who is not involved in the development of the application, have them proofread the application, have them read the NOFO. Are you answering the questions in the order that they were asked? So like I said, we have a little test here. There are 4 errors in this slide. So I'm going to give you a minute or two to read it over. And if you can throw in the chat any kind of where you see the responses that are incorrect. And I don't even know if I could see the chat.
I'll kind of monitor it for you, Flora.
Thank you. I was able to pop it up. So it can be a spelling word or a tense, like past tense, future tense, or just a wrong word altogether.
I'm not see. Oh, here we go. Management spelled wrong.
Management is spelled wrong.
I think that.
Good job, Jen. Good job, Sabine. I changed this one up from last year a little bit. I wanted to make sure, and I wanted to drive home that the program manager must commit. Yep, Michelle, there you go. The must commit 75%. You can go above 75%. Oh, yep, that Valley, the second Valley wasn't after Sally Cash, wasn't even on purpose. That's a good one. The knowing that the program manager is going to be committed at least 75%. Having the FTEs in there is a really good idea, having it written that way. So you want to, before you submit, you want to check the application package for all required materials, that you did attach all of the resumes, that you did attach all the required forms. And keep in mind that you guys are not the only applicant. There's going to be a bunch of applicants. So what you don't want to do is wait to the last minute and run into the error screen of death, right? So you want to submit it beforehand, because if you do forget to, submit a SF-424 or something like that, you can contact the person on the NOFO, notice of funding opportunity, I apologize. And correct those errors. So that's all I've got. Do we have any questions That's all I got as far as slides are prepared. I did get information this morning about our capacity building notice of funding opportunity. They will be, the grants division will be hosting a webinar on Wednesday, November 15th, 2023, next Wednesday, from 2 to 3:30. I will send that information to Michelle to be able to distribute that as well. I have the one pager and the notice of funding opportunity document as well. That one just popped up right before. So do we have any questions?
Great. Thank you, Flora, so much for that. The lead program holds a dear spot in my heart after administering it for 20 years prior to joining a KSU TAB partner as with ADAPTA. So great information there, great programs, and through HUD, and definitely check them out if you are interested in that world. All right, we do have time for questions later on if you think of something, or feel free to throw it in the chat. Moving on, we're gonna go on to job training grants, and we have Alma joining us from EPA Region 7 to tell us more about the job training. Alma, are you ready to jump in? See, there we go. And she's got Jennifer Morris there as her technical guru to get us going. And
we're selected.
And you are ready. Just need to share. Perfect. You're set.
All right. Can you see me and hear me now?
We can.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Michelle. So with that, I'm Alma Marino, mom, and I hope to interest you in and teach you how to prepare for applying for the job training grants for your community. And where is my slide advancing? No.
Arrow.
Nope, not working. Sorry. I'm having technical difficulties.
It didn't move?
Nope. Oh, wait, the controls are down here. They're very faint. There. I think I just clicked on the screen. Sorry, folks. So these are the figures. Substantial amount of funding with the objective of creating a lot of jobs with this stimulus funding. And so basically now what you want to do is get a piece of that money so that you can help folks in your community to be able to get those environmental jobs that are occurring in their community and get the higher wages, and then get that money back into your community. The objective of the job training program is basically to recruit, to train, and to place the unemployed and the underemployed residents of your area to obtain full-time sustainable employment, not just a job, but have the skill set to get different jobs so they have a career in environmental work. And we want to build the local workforce to have those skills that are needed to perform that environmental work safely in their community, and particularly brownfields. You don't forget that, because if you're missing that, you're not going to be able to succeed. EPA's objective is essentially to further environmental justice in these underserved areas. And so you're going to want to identify one of those areas or more in your vicinity. So now who can apply? It's the nonprofits, community colleges and training centers, universities, basically the standard local governments and tribes as well. There's a full list in the request for applications, which you'll hear me refer as the RFA. The funding used to be up to $200,000. Now it can go up to $500,000. And the time period used to be 3 years, and now it's up to 5 years. You could still apply for 3 or 4, but 5 is the maximum. And I would be looking out for that RFA in May of each year generally. Since I mentioned that Brownfields is a critical component of what you need to include in terms of your environmental area, I wanted to remind you what it is that a Brownfields is. And this is, I'm not going to read these slides. You have my talking points in what you downloaded, and just remember to include Brownfields. The key here is that we want to connect the people to those jobs. And so what I want you to focus on is ensure you're going to first identify this target area that is of underserved, disadvantaged, maybe what we would call an environmental justice area. Okay, and then you're going to want to ensure that it's those residents that benefit. So you're going to look to see what are their needs. And that's why you look at things from their perspective, and then you set things up so that you can service that area for the things that they need by looking at the market demands, the labor market demands in your area, and learning from the employers, hey, what are you having trouble finding? What skill sets would you like in terms of technical training, but also life skills, you know, dependability, ability to work with others, whatever it is, they will tell you what those skills are. And then the key is to build a program that satisfies that. And to do that, it's not just like they say, it takes a village, right? It's literally going to take you so many other partners, because you've got to have basically 4 key components: the environmental work. There's got to be something for them to do, right? There's got to be life skills and job readiness, which is not paid for. I'm sorry, the life skills, we pay for the technical training, but we do not pay for the life skills training and the job readiness training. So you've got to find a partner to help you with that. And then there's a network of community organizations where they live that already know them, that will be there long before, you know, for much further than when you're gone, okay? And they will be there to support them. So you want to include those people now as well as a partner. And then, of course, the whole objective is not just to train them, but to get them hired. So you need to identify employers that are willing to work with you to build the curriculum, possibly coach, also interview, and most definitely hire. And you're going to want to get that in writing, because that's what the application requires. And without, you're going to describe it, but the letter's better supported in writing very specifically, and do not use canned letters, because if they all say the same, then I don't really know what they're committing to, what people are really committed to. It needs to be specific for them. I'm going to zero in again. Our purpose is to focus on the unemployed and the underemployed residents that are impacted. And our goal, again, is not a job, but a career, giving them a variety of skills so that they can get, maybe they try asbestos removal and they find they just do not like that. So then they switch to something else because they have other licenses and certifications that are in demand in their community. And that's how they can get sustainable employment for the whole year, and they can have these livable wage jobs. What's new is that we've added stipends. Through the pandemic, we learned, originally we knew that it was difficult. Sometimes people don't have transportation, so they needed support for that. And that's been covered under job training for a lot of years. But what we learned through the pandemic is that childcare was incredibly expensive, and it just didn't even make sense for people to show up to our training because they couldn't afford to cover that. So we've come up with stipends for childcare subsidies. And in addition, sometimes they may have a low-paying service job, but that's what pays the bills. That's what puts food on the table. And so we needed to find a way to be able to have them be able to come to the classroom while still supporting their families and themselves. And so therefore, now we have stipends where people can get compensated for literally taking training in the classroom, or even for on-the-job training. If you can get agreements with employers, sometimes they'll say, well, you pay 50, they'll take a chance on someone, let's say, if I pay 50% of the wages from job training and they pay the other 50, and then they find they love them, right? So it gives them a shoe in to with the employer. The key on this slide, I have all these hyperlinks, and if you click on that, it'll take you straight to the guidelines, and there's an explanation in the guidance on participant support costs so that you know what that is, the ins and outs of it. So these are what I call the musts of the job training program. You must target the population I just mentioned. You must be an eligible entity. You must not be duplicating some job training program that already exists in your community. But bear this in mind, even though there may be a job training grant, either from us or another organization in your community, if there's a difference, there can be more than one. So maybe you're targeting a different audience. Maybe you're providing a different set of curriculum. Those pieces, one of those alone can avoid duplication. Okay, so you want to be clear on that. The one required course in job training is this 40-hour HASWAPer. But I want you to realize something. Without the OSHA 10, it doesn't matter if you have that, because you cannot get boots on the ground and do any work at a site without the OSHA 10 training as well. So just be aware of that. You want to give a leg up to your graduates to be able to be picked by that employer, because they don't have to invest any more in them by having to train them for something else. And then, of course, the last part of my slide has to do with just formatting and things like that you must follow. If there's any question, just write it up. When it comes to threshold, you can send that to me for review. We can run it through our lawyers if there's any questions and get you an answer. You should never fail threshold. And with that, looking at how does one of these grants work, you're basically applying, let's say, up to that $500,000. And in 24, well, let me start by saying job training starts early. So we are already, right now, the selections are being made for the funding for fiscal year 24. We are still in calendar year 23. The federal year starts October 1, but literally all our stuff is already, for all the 24 money is already being selected right now for award and for announcement soon. Okay, so bear that in mind. We start in the year before for the new fiscal year money. So the applications came in August of 2023 for the money that's already for the new year. And basically in your first year, you recruit and you screen, you set things up and how you're going to do your training, you get your contracts with your trainers. And then years 2, 3, and 4 is when you're training. And the 5th year is when you're doing, there's a mandatory 1-year follow-up post-graduation. And that's why we give that 5th year. This is all the different, well, not all of them, but a significant number of the trainings that can be used. As I mentioned earlier, 40-hour HASWAPer is required. One of the new things is these lighter things over here, the underground storage tank testing. That is new. But the key here that I want you to focus on, again, all of those underlined items, they're hyperlinks. What you need to focus in must be a current labor market assessment. You can use data, you can use reports, you can do your own surveys, you can have individual meetings, group meetings, all sorts of things, but you need to identify when you did them so that it's clear that it's current, and you need to identify the results so that you can then say, these are the results, and this is what's needed, and these are the needs of my individuals, and this is what I'm doing to address this. You need to marry the two. There needs to be a nexus. If you decide to apply for funding in or have a curriculum activity dealing with underground storage tanks, just look at the RFA language. That's what this slide is all about, because it's very particular. And with that, I want to look at additional things that you can pay for besides the actual training. It's the personnel and your fringe benefits cost for conducting the activities like the outreach to find people, to recruit them, the screening process to see who's going to get into a class or not, the training itself, some of the work gear that they may need to do in order to have their exercises, or let's say to do the on-the-job training, right? They're going to have the right work gear. And then the placement of the graduates and the follow-up, the time spent on that those are all eligible activities. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the transportation stipends, and then the stipends for people being in class or on the job training, as well as the childcare subsidy. What can you not use it for? And this is there. I'm not going to read the slides to you, but basically those first two bullets there, you need partners that have funding that can cover that. And that's what we would call your leveraging of funds. That's not mandatory. If it falls through, if it doesn't come through, then it's all right. You don't put it in your budget, and you'll find that out once you get into the weeds on the RFA. Administrative cost is something that we allow up to 5% now. That is not a rate. That is a dollar amount of the 5% of the funds that you apply for. And so you want to go to Appendix I to actually look for the details on that. And now I want to motivate you, okay? I want to get you excited so that you can see the potential of what could happen in your area if you were to get, the city of Springfield has a program called Green for Green, and this is a video on that.
I'm so excited to be here today for the Green for Green grant graduation. I would also like to thank the regional administrator, Meg McAllister, for being here today. We had a job fair yesterday. In fact, everybody has a job offer from yesterday's job fair. Some of you have up to 4.
What the city of Springfield is doing and what the Green for Green program is doing is such a great example for the rest of the state and the rest of the country.
And I'd like to begin this by saying thank you. When I got out of prison in Florida at 18, it was hell to find a job. We don't have any treatment programs. We don't have any programs like this. This is utterly unique. And to be 60 days from release here now, and to already have a job waiting for me, to have a bunch of EPA certifications, that is a blessing in and of itself. Well, nothing was overly complicated. We're certified flaggers, mold abatement, silica competent, excavation competent, OSHA 10, OSHA 40, bloodborne pathogens, and there's 4 other ones that we have the ability to go get when we get out.
They're great workers, well-trained, been really good part of our team, good additions. And with safety always being priority number 1, it's good that they have that just general sense and understanding. And also, I mean, just being able to reach out and help these people find a nice continuous path back into society and the workforce. I have 2 that came to us through this program. They're excellent. The training that they had beforehand really set them up to hit the ground running and be successful.
I got 4 job offers yesterday at the job fair, and I'm looking forward to getting out and making something of myself.
I've done a majority of my adult life in prison, so I really didn't know what to expect. And I just wanted to tell them thank you for giving me the courage to actually think that I could actually get out there and get a job.
We all don't have great pasts. 60% of our employees are involved in criminal justice. When we say we're a second chance company, we really mean it.
I'm truly honored to be here with all of you today, and I just want to say how proud we are of you. Not only have you developed the skills needed to secure full-time, long-lasting careers in environmental services and sciences field, but you're doing something that matters for your community.
There's people out there that have hope for us as individuals. It's not just, we're not lost causes.
At EPA, we really believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to improve their lives. Especially in the Brownfields program, we really believe in second chances for people and for places. And we were very excited to be able to provide the resources for this program. But these graduates did the work, and the fact that they all have job offers and will be able to give back to their communities and make it a safer place to live and to work and to play is really incredible, and we're so proud of them.
Oops. Flying over.
I'm so excited to be here today for the Green for Green grant.
No, I stopped it. Now, how do I get to the next? There we go. Great. Sorry, technical difficulties on my end. By the way, I want to say I'm so proud of the city of Springfield for taking their program behind the wall. It's been a dream of mine to see that probably for more than 6 years. With that motivation, here is the anticipated schedule. And I want you to notice that May 2024, it is right around the corner. And there is a lot of preparation that you need to do that's required really before you can put pen to paper or, type on the keyboard for your application. And so if you plan to apply, start by contacting me. We can even have a conversation. It's what I call program development. You can ask any question you want, and we can just have a conversation, and that gives you, guides you on different places for you to, things you need to focus on and look at in making your decision. So with that, remember to look for that RFA. And then this just has a bunch of links if you're considering being an applicant or a partner. And I would advise that you go to those hyperlinks and check them out. This is what's required for an application package. I will not read the slides for you. But basically what you want is you're gonna have to have pithy, positive, and precise messaging. And you want that messaging to start at the beginning and not get lost in the middle. And then at the end, you want it there and you want them to connect. I call it, it's like a red thread, and then you're gonna tie it in a bow at the end. And with that, I will get to the point that your application has 2 parts to it. It's got to pass threshold. And if it passes threshold, then it can go to ranking. And that's where you get the money. So you want to make sure that you pass threshold. There isn't any reason for you to fail on that. You just got to ask and contact me, write it up, and see if it passes. If you are interested in applying for the job training program, you need to send an email with your contact information to that mailbox, which is r7_brownfields@epa.gov. And then also make sure when I send webinar messages out, that the emails go from that mailbox. So you need to look at your Outlook folders and make sure that it's not in the other or the cluttered or the junk folders, and kind of identify that you want these to come in, or at least know where to look for them. These are some of the guiding steps. Again, as I mentioned, you need to start early. There is lots to read and lots to do. And you will need to, the most time-consuming ones are needing to research that environmental labor market demand, plus the documents that you may have to find, and listing your dates and all the activities that you do, and summarizing it in a very precise manner with the least amount of space. You're going to be pushed for space. You'll need to find out about the environmental work and the employers in your area, and what it is in technical skills as well as life skills that they need in order for them to say, hey, I want that particular person. And then you're going to build this curriculum, right? And it takes time to develop these relationships that are going to help you support being successful in applying and being able to not just get the money, but be able to implement a good program, and then be able to have those people placed in jobs. And don't forget, well-supported, successful graduates are your greatest promoters for your program. They will draw others to the program, and they in turn will also draw employers to the table. In fact, some of them start their own businesses and become employers themselves. This is just a whole list of contacts depending on which state you're from, right? And so I wanted to give you this. There's a couple of changes. These are in my talking points, which you have a PDF of. And in Nebraska, Taryn, her last name is Horn. This email will still work, but Horn is the new last name. And if you just replace the old with the new, it should give you her current email. Jacob Roeder in Missouri, he travels throughout the state and he knows a lot of these small and rural communities. He has the pulse on what's going on. So his number is 573-576-4785. And his email is also, and his number are in the talking points that you have in PDF. These are the Region 7 contacts, as well as some EJ and an EJ Tic-Tac contact. These are, I wanted to make sure these are resources. If you want to talk to some projects in Iowa, these are the state people here at EPA that know within Brownfields different work that's going on in their state. Obviously, I do job training. Sometimes smaller rural communities, they may not have grants, so we do what's called targeted Brownfields assessments. This is the contact. And then Anna Marie Romero, she is actually a trained job training reviewer, and she can do EJScreens for you to help you find out what's the environmental issues in your area. And then Tanya Brownlee, we just started working October 31st of this year, and they're available with a lot of funding for communities to help you be successful as well. There's her contact. And with that, these are the last hyperlinks for the current guidelines you can start working with, but 25 is coming out soon in mid-May, probably early May is my guess. These are winning proposals. The ones that you'll see are the ones for 23 because 24 is about to be announced. And there's some other resources here. Oh, this last resource, do not forget to go and look there because those are very helpful. And with that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Alma.
You're welcome.
A lot of great information from all of our federal partners here in this first part of our session. And so if there are questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. Otherwise, at the end, we will leave some time for questions. But otherwise, we're going to kind of roll into
Michelle,
yes.
Can I give a shout out to last week's speaker, November 2nd, Nancy Nelson? She had a great, if people would go listen to that, that's going to help them really prepare for their writing so that you can give a hand up to people to help them transform their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all.
Yeah, definitely go back and check out the first few series. A lot of great information in all of them. So yes, thank you, Alma. So now we're going to move on to hearing from our panel of successful grantees. And so again, they're going to be kind of touching on some of these different grants that we just heard about from our federal partners. We're going to be starting with Jessica Pressler from Jamestown, Kansas. And her presentation will be starting up here, and I'll turn it over to Jessica. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I've had some technical difficulties this morning, so I'm sorry that I wasn't able to show my screen. I thank you for letting me be a part of the sessions. They've been so informative and full of so many wonderful resources. So I will jump in here. If you could go to next slide. My name's Jessica Pressler, and I'm the city clerk in Jamestown, Kansas. We're a small agricultural community in Cloud County, Kansas. If you know where Salina, Kansas is, if you go about 45 miles north and then about 12 miles west, that's where we're located. We are very small and operate on a very small budget, so we're always looking for grants. I've listed a few things that we've used grant funding for. This isn't anywhere close to all of it, but just a couple things we've done in the last couple of years that have been grant funded. We went ahead and did a RV park. That's been a wonderful, wonderful addition to the city. We've had so many people coming and staying. We did a golf course that has been utilized so often. I've been surprised. We've done about $40,000 in park renovations. We did just do a new city hall, which thanks to USDA and the Community Facilities Grant. And at the moment, we're working on about $65,000 HVAC project for community buildings, and that's also between local and USDA Community Facilities Grants. Next slide, please. I just wanted to go over some local resources, and these will be different in each community, but local resources and local agencies that are able to assist. We have, every area has community foundations. We've got the Greater Community Foundation for Cloud County, which is basically the Salina Greater Community Foundation has that link. And they do so many grants in our area. We have the Dane G. Hansen, we have the Cloud County Public Health Fund, the Gelvin Anderson Medical Impact Fund. We have the Youth Activity Fund, the Seize the Moment Fund for Cloud County, and the Leonard Dorothy Swenson Fund. And those are all able to assist as matching or just assistance on any type of grant. And I can't tell anybody enough how wonderful those local grants are. Right now, for one fiscal year, each awardee is allowed $15,000 from the community foundation funding, and you're allowed to get 10,000 of that actually from your community impact grant funding, which is amazing. In Cloud County, we have DuClose. It's spring and fall, and those of course are smaller, but they help so much, and every penny counts when it comes to grant funding, I've found out. I went ahead and just listed like our regional planning commissions. I can't say enough how helpful and wonderful they are. They're always so motivated to assist in anything, and they're just wonderful. We use Cloud Corp a lot for a lot of our economic needs for data research, and they're always in your area. I'm sure there's another economic development agency that would be more than happy to assist. Of course, USDA and all the wonderful things that they do, Department of Commerce, Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And then there's so many grants on grants.gov. I'm sure everyone knows it would take so long to go over them all, but that's a wonderful resource if you're looking for grants as well. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go over each slide because I think that a lot of things were covered by Joan and Flora, but just a couple quick things. Finding out if your project qualifies. There's a lot of projects that you might think wouldn't qualify for grant funding, but it's just finding that perfect grant for you and your project. And does your project qualify for more than one grant? There's so many grants that I've found out that you're able to have several different grant fundings on a budget, but you need to know that from the beginning. And so planning is such a huge part of any grant. And that's why at the beginning, it's nice to know, do you have local support? Is what you're doing going to impact more agencies than just your own? Are there other agencies in your area that are going to benefit from this project? It could be playground updates or redoing a sidewalk. There's many other agencies in your area that might not only benefit from your project, but maybe they want to support your project. Maybe your local Lions Club says, hey, I've heard about this project you're doing, and we know that you need as much local assistance and local backup as you can. We'd love to do a movie night and have all the proceeds go toward this project. You don't know what organizations or agencies would be willing to help if you don't ask. And so I always say, and I learned the law, I guess I wouldn't say the hard way, but at the beginning of preparing grants, I didn't realize that you could just reach out and say, hey, is this something you would be interested in? Is this something that you would be willing to support? And so I do think reaching out to those local agencies and seeing if you can get support on your project in any way, even if it's just we would love to write you a support letter, is fantastic. Next slide, please. I just wanted to list all the wonderful, and I won't read them, things that USDA does. Next slide, please. And they are in everything. Next slide, please. Rural development, they are so knowledgeable, well-being, personable. Their staff, I can't say enough about rural development and how wonderful they've been. I've called with questions that I've thought were just silly, and I bet they're going to think this is a dumb question. And I've always been so surprised and happy with how wonderful they've been. And if they can't give me the answer, they always have somebody or an agency office or website that I can go to get those answers. And I just went ahead and listed the Kansas Rural Development State Office and a couple numbers, the Hayes office, Iowa office, Newton office, and then of course their website. Next slide, please. Finding the right application. There's some projects that I've started thinking that they would qualify for a certain grant and then they didn't. And so a big part I would say would be finding the right application for your project. There's so many applications. I went ahead and listed just a few of USDA's. And finding the community facilities, there's so many different things on that community facilities. It's not just breaking ground and building a new facility. And you don't know that until you really go searching. Next slide, please. On rural development and USDA's websites, they have the fact sheets, which I think are fantastic. So if you're going to go for a USDA, the fact sheets are wonderful. They explain to you, what does this program do? Am I eligible, and am I in an eligible area? What am I going to be allowed to use the funds for? And then they also let you know what their priorities are for funding at the moment, which I think is so wonderful. And it lets you know, okay, maybe my project at this time isn't in the priorities. Maybe I should hold off, work on my project proposal a little bit longer, work on my budget, try to find some partners and come back when the priorities maybe fit this project more. They also have the terms, additional requirements, how to start, and the best part is who to call with questions. Networking, I think, is a huge part of grant writing. Next slide, please. This is just a checklist, which again, I just got this from USDA's website, and I went ahead and did the two forms, Form 1492-40 and 1942-39 for Community Facilities Direct Loan and Grant Program, just to show you how user-friendly these checklists are. I know it, of course, at the beginning looked very intimidating, but they step for step tell you what you need to do in the order that you need to get it done, what the forms are, the form numbers, and who to contact if you have questions. Next slide, please. One thing I will say is marketing your community, filling out the pre-application, try to appeal to the reviewer, maybe tell a story. Why does my project deserve this? There's so many people out there looking for funding. There's so many communities and agencies that have wonderful programs that need funding. So I do think it's great to step out and say, hey, my community needs this because to me, my community is special. And I want to tell you a story about my community and why my community deserves this. I went ahead and attached a picture of our old monkey bars. We redid the park several times, but one of the things at our park originally was these monkey bars that had been there forever, and out of nostalgia and financial strains, they hadn't been changed. And when we were applying to get those park renovations, we went ahead and gave a little story about these monkey bars and how you can clearly see the erosion on these monkey bars. You can clearly see that they're not safe for children. They're not safe for anybody. Kids can cut their fingers. And then we also included information about our local kids, things that mean a lot to our kids' communities. So just marketing your community and trying to appeal to whoever's going to be reviewing that grant. Next slide, please. One thing, right when I tried getting grants, I was always afraid to reach out for help. I was afraid, I don't know the answer to this. I don't want to seem like I'm pesting people. I don't want to seem silly that I'm asking these questions. But I found out that the worst thing they can say is no, and I've actually never had that happen. If anything, I've had other agencies be so happy to help and assist. 99% of the time, they give you the right contact if they're not the right contact. So I do think networking and just reaching out to other agencies, maybe other people that you know have received the grant, see how they went about their pre-application, their application, their budget, maybe see who they reached out to, what agencies wanted to work for them, what agencies in their community wanted to partner or support their projects. Having a network of people that you can reach out to and feeling comfortable to reach out to them is such a big part of grant writing, I believe. And it's just been such a wonderful resource to be able to reach out to all these agencies and have people not only give you the correct information, but also give you ideas on what you could do to further your application. And I believe that that is all for me. I know that there are questions at the end. My slideshow, you guys will be able to get all the slides for. This is my contact. If anybody ever needs assistance or has a question, if I can't answer it, which there's a lot I can't, I will make sure to send you to somebody that has the right answers. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. You know, you hit it right on the spot that networking is so huge in grant writing and getting the information together. So I think that's a great point that you made during that. So thank you again for that presentation. And as I said, questions at the end, and that is loaded. Next up, we do have Jen McCohen from the COSED Development Corporation in COSED, Nebraska. And so she's going to share some information on some HUD programs that they had. Take it away, Jen.
All right. Hello, everybody. When I was preparing this presentation, it dawned on me that my very first job in community and economic development was funded through a grant through HUD that was called the Rural Housing and Economic Development Program back about 25 years ago. So I guess I've come full circle. I've written about 15 million in HUD and CDBG grants. And some of these slides I'm going to just kind of pass through because we've gone through them already, but there's a lot of programs under HUD and we've touched on some of them, but the main one is under the Community Planning and Development Division, and that would be the CDBG, which is funds that are awarded to the states and distributed in some entitlement communities, so the larger towns. So it's really important, as other presenters mentioned, that we research programs to make sure that your project fits into the guidelines. And with CDBG, there's a consolidated plan that the states have and also an action plan. And it's important that when they're seeking public comment that you're letting them know what the needs of your communities are, because if it's not in the consolidated plan, even though it could be an eligible activity under CDBG, then you're not going to be able to access funds for certain activities. And an example that comes to mind is I think CDBG will fund Parks and Rec, but for the longest time in Nebraska, that wasn't part of their consolidated plan. And so it took some public comments before they considered that, before parks were an eligible activity in Nebraska. And so also with eligible activities, make sure that you're really looking at the fine print. Like libraries are fine for eligibility, but they also have to be accredited. So there are ways to maybe like work with your program rep to make sure that the library gets eligible or whatever, but just make sure that you're looking at the fine print. And then there are activities that are ineligible, and make sure you know those. For some reason, like with smaller towns, I see this a lot with community centers or libraries. They want to throw their village offices in the same building, and anywhere where government is conducted is ineligible under the CDBG program. So you have to get kind of creative if you're doing a multi-use facility such as that. And then with CDBG, it always has to meet a national objective, and I'll talk about that on the next slide, but over 70% of the CDBG funds have to meet low to moderate income targeting requirements. And so make sure that you know what your low to moderate income requirements are. And then also, will it meet other federal requirements? So I have a lot of people that come to me asking me to write grants, and they've already kind of started their project and they're still looking for money. And so most of the time it's going to be ineligible if you've already started it or contracted for it, or if you're too far in and you haven't met all of those federal requirements before you've been awarded funds. And so, like I said, 75% of, or 70% of CDBG funds have to go to low to moderate income households, which a low to moderate income household is considered 80% or below of the area median income. And one of the first national objectives is LMI on an area basis, which that could be your county, your city, a census tract, fire district, I've seen, and that's usually determined by census, or you can do an income survey. And then there's low to moderate income clientele. So there's certain classes of individuals that are automatically considered LMI, and that might be elderly, which is anybody over 62, abused children or adults. So like a battered women's shelter would automatically be eligible, or homeless shelter, people with AIDS, or anybody with severe disabilities could be automatically considered low to moderate income or limited clientele. And then there's also by household. So it could be that household has to be 80% or below of the area median income. And a lot of times those programs are like owner occupied rehab or rental rehab. Also daycares go under this national objective. So that means if you do fund a daycare with CDBG funds, then you're having to do income surveys for the families that are utilizing the daycare for a certain period of time. And then economic development projects sometimes can get some CDBG funds, and usually that's by job. And so the individuals that you've made the jobs available to have to be 51% or more low to moderate income. And then slum and blight. So we've used this in Nebraska. I don't know how the other states do it, but for downtown revitalization a lot of times. And so we can do commercial rehab or removal of architectural barriers for different businesses. And usually that's when we've declared the downtown a slum and blighted area. And then urgent need is usually rare, and I'm not even sure how many times that's applicable. But it's really important to do a lot of work up front, gather as much information as you can about your project. What I see a lot of times is people that say, all right, hey, we've decided that it would be great to have a community center. And when you start to look at if the community supports it, then after they've already decided that they're going to build a community center, they'll send out a survey that says, hey, do you think that we should have a community center? Or do you think we should apply for grant funds to have a community center? And typically the funding agency wants to see the order of events go. We've identified a need, and then we've decided that this is how we're going to solve it. And so any past examples that you can show that this need has been demonstrated or has been communicated by the public is going to help your application, as well as all of the work that you've done for the project up to date. For HUD, there's 5 factors of award. A lot of times this is about the same as what your scoring criteria is going to be. And so they look at capacity, need, the soundness of your work plan, leveraging, and then whatever the end results are. And for capacity, the applicant is always going to be a county or a municipality, but sometimes there's a subrecipient organization there, like a housing group or a senior center, a community center board. And so when they're looking at capacity, they're looking at the capacity of the applicant and the capacity of the organization that's going to be in charge of the facility or the implementation of the project. And so any partnerships, they're looking at what the capacity of those partners are as well. And then also you want to highlight the relationship between the applicant and the organization. So if you've done projects successfully together in the past, then you really want to tout those results. And then over half of HUD's proposals are eliminated because they fail to document what the problem's need is. And typically people talk about the need of the organization versus the need of the people that is affected by the project. And so you really want your need to be people-centered. And with CDBG, especially low to moderate income, people-centered. And so the more you can show how this ties back to the national objective, the stronger your needs statement is going to be. And then also with your needs, there's different ways to show that, and you're going to want to have as many combinations of this as possible. And so like a statistical analysis, this could be from a national source, like in the library example. If you're building a new library, you might want to have some statistics about the National Library Association shows that low-income children with access to a library have a greater reading comprehension score than children without access to a public library. And something like that can help to substantiate your case. And then local surveys are something that can also get a wide breadth of opinions from the public about if this project is warranted or needed. And then usually you'll want to have a couple meetings, stakeholder meetings, get a lot of input, feedback, get the press there, make sure that the newspaper is covering that, and you'll want to attach copies of those newspaper articles as a attachment in your grant application to show that you guys have discussed this with the public. And then there's all these documents that usually sit on every community's shelf after they're done, but really want to go through like your comprehensive plan, any kind of planning studies, community action plans or strategic plans, housing studies if it's a housing project that might have shown a need for something like this, and make sure that you include those documents as an attachment or reference them in the narrative of your application. And then finally, some case studies. So that might be a local testimony or a quote. I did a project with a library that the library was in a really bad part of town. The parking lot for the library was across the highway. And so you had to park and then cross the highway to get to the front door of the library. And there was a child that was struck and killed by a car. And so that was a very strong story about the need to relocate the library in a safer area of town that was more accessible. And then another one of those factors that they look at is your soundness of approach. And this is where I have a lot of people that they don't want to go too far with the planning of their project because they don't know if they're going to get the grant. And so it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing. I always tell people, you do all the work just like you know that you're going to get these funds. And then you're more likely to get the funds. But there are some things that you can't do because then it will be ineligible. So there's a fine line that you kind of have to dance across so that you can show that you are ready to proceed, but you haven't done like the engineering, because otherwise that would be ineligible. So, you know, there's ways to get around it. And so you can't go out for bids, but you can get an opinion of costs, or you can't buy property, but you could get an option on the property to show site control. So you want to try to get as many of those things lined up so that you are ready to proceed without actually obligating any funds because you don't know that you have them. And then leveraging, make sure that you're showing what other partners are involved, and make sure that you can quantify that. And that needs to be tracked and verifiable, and check the guidelines to see what kind of in-kind leveraging can count towards your matching requirements. And then measurable outcomes. Usually, like with the CDBG grants, the first part of the reporting is quantity examples. So that might be the number of houses rehabbed, you know, something like that, number of linear feet of paved streets. But then you also have proxy outcome examples. So that would be other results that have happened as a result of the project. So that might be if you had built a youth center, you could show a reduction in high school dropout rates after the center opened. So that that's another positive outcome that's a result of the project. And then there's always qualitative outcomes. So you could do a community survey and say, you know, community satisfaction has gone up since our project has been completed, or, you know, if you're doing housing rehabilitation, you may show that it's kind of been a domino effect and caused other households in that neighborhood to do improvements. And so the overall valuation of a neighborhood has improved as a result of just the few projects that you've done. And a couple of things to really have a strong application. Number one, you want to show community support. So, you know, sometimes it's really hard, you know, even if it's like a senior center project and maybe it's only the seniors that really care about the project, but the more holistic community support you can show, the stronger your application is going to be. And if your organization, you can show that they have the capacity to get it done. If they've done other successful projects, or you've done other CDBG grants in the past, make sure that you're showing that you have what it takes to successfully implement the project. And then a lot of times, like you can get extra scoring, or it's looked upon more favorably if you have more financial resources than is actually required. So it's showing a greater amount of leveraging than the minimum amount. And so also you want it, as the other presenters mentioned, it should be easy to read for the reviewer, and make sure that it connects the project back to community needs, HUD priorities, and the state's action plan. So those are all things that you need to connect those dots. And then I get this question all the time about, should I hire a grant writer? And I guess the one thing I can say to people is, would you hire somebody else to write your autobiography? So no one can tell your story better than you. And I would look at each question and delegate, you know, team members to write or collect information about it, and then put it together, ask outsiders to review it, make sure that it makes sense. CDBG and HUD grants have a lot of facets, so you'll want to have a certified or experienced grant administrator look over it, make sure that you're meeting all the technical aspects, that, you know, it's formatted properly, that you've got all of the federal forms filled out properly, and putting some of the final touches on the application. But in terms of a grant writer, I think the more hands-on you can be with the application, it will show to the reviewers. And I think that's all I got.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. Again, lots of great information there about HUD programs, and you know, it applies to all the different grants we've talked about. Certainly knowing your community, telling your story. A great message. So thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, we have Haley Jones-Sides, and she is with Springfield, Missouri, gonna share some information on EPA job training grants for us.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, I will get started. I don't think it hurts to reiterate all the expertise that other presenters have shared, but I'll do my best to skip through some of the duplicate info. I also wanted to thank Alma for showing the video of our grant where we combined and braided 2 of our grant fundings to help individuals behind the walls. I really appreciate that. That was an amazing success story. And to introduce myself, I'm Haley Jones-Sides. I'm the grant coordinator for the City of Springfield's Department of Workforce Development. We are one of 26 departments, and our mission is to serve the underserved and underrepresented populations. We connect individuals to training and employment, as well as community resources. We offer workforce readiness skills, hiring events, and we have an amazing group of workforce development specialists that enroll these individuals into our grants that we offer and provide intensive case management services. Like I said, we are a 99% grant funded department. That's the importance of being able to write strong grant applications. As you can see on the map here, we are located in Greene County, and the area that is circled is our Ozark region. We are fortunate to be the programmatic and fiscal administrators of the Workforce Innovative Opportunity Act, or the WIOA grants. So we currently operate as a city, we operate several federal grants, but our department specifically is currently operating 2 Department of Labor grants, Department of Commerce grant, and like Alma showed, the EPA Brownfields job training grant. So just to go over some of the basic guidelines and understanding preliminary questions, our specific EPA grant, it was a cooperative agreement, which means there is substantial involvement and frequent communication with your grant officer. So oftentimes you'll be working side by side with that officer. As far as requirements, it's for EPA, like Alma also said, there's a HAZWOPER training that's required. But do you have an understanding of environmental justice? Is there a match? What about leverage costs? For our grant in particular, we had to have specific partnerships in place. So if you are required to have partnerships in place, do you have time to establish those if you don't already have those in place? Like everybody else said, SAMS.gov is a requirement, so that should be one of the first steps. If you are not already registered, you should start there. Permission. Do you need permission to apply for this? As a city government, we have to go through our council process, and that can sometimes take up to 2 months, especially if it needs to go to a second read. So make sure that you plan for the time to get the appropriate permission. And then as far as appropriateness, are you the best option for an applicant? Some organizations have the capacity, some don't, and some aren't aware of the funding opportunity. So for example, the city of Springfield, previously, our planning and development department had been awarded EPA Brownfields grants, but they hadn't applied for the job training portion. So we joined forces with them to utilize past experience in working with EPA. Lastly, do you have the time? Depending on the size of your grant writing team, and then also depending on the size of the grant, I would not personally allot less than 100 hours. And that's about 2.5 weeks with a team of 2 to 3 people, and that's working 8 hours a day. Research and preparation. Don't reinvent the wheel, but reassess often. So if you or anyone in your organization has been awarded a grant, utilize those prior applications. But be cautious. Acronyms change, staff transition to other roles, partners change, goals of the federal agency, and the goals of your own organization change. By all hands on deck, I mean at this point in the process, the research and preparation process, now is the time to include your partners, your finance team, your compliance, all the grant team. Everyone at this point should have an idea of the funding opportunity announcement and have reviewed it by now. And like everyone else has said, ensuring that your organization and the grant priorities are aligned is probably one of the most important things. If they don't align, now is probably the time to look for a different grant. And again, like everyone else said, understanding that labor market information, the community need, who are your major employers? Who are your training providers? What resources does your community have? Are you familiar with now, then, later occupation charts? As far as the grant goals and target populations, how does this fit into your own organization's capacity? And then from there, do you have the capacity and to serve the grant service area proposed? I'm sure if you've ever written a grant before, you've heard the term building the plane as it's taking off, and it's not fun. Excuse the typo on that slide, by the way. When you're determining who's writing your team, one helpful hint I have is Don't be afraid to ask other people in your organization. Oftentimes there are individuals that have an interest in writing grants and that may have a lot of valuable information and input to add to those grant applications. As you're delegating out different sections of your grant application, do so on strengths. Some people are much better at writing work plan type things. Some are much better in Excel and doing training outlines and such. And one thing our team did here at the city is we identified the due dates. And as soon as we did, we sent out calendar invites for regular meetings, but then we also sent out a submission date that was 2 days prior to that due date, just to make sure. Sorry about that. I think I had technical difficulties. Our team reviews the previous awards that the EPA gives out. You can do that on the EPA.gov site as other grantees. We start to compile a list of potential resources, and together as a whole, before we get started on anything, we establish a unified project summary abstract, and we make sure that all of our partners are on the same page. Another thing we do as a team is, depending on the formatting requirements of the grant, we establish a unified file sharing and file naming process. I can't tell you how many times we've had final 1, final 2, final saved in a folder, and we're all scrambling at the end to figure out which is the most appropriate one. Like everyone else has said, partners are key. When it comes down to selecting your training providers, your employers, and your community-based organizations, I do highly recommend that you choose wisely. I don't think it's a bad thing to conduct an unofficial risk assessment, view their credibility, their capacity, review their mission and their vision, and make sure that they align with the grant priorities as well. Again, make sure they're on the same page with you. As with your work plan, you're going to develop that later on with your grant officer, but make sure from the beginning that they're on the same page with your overall abstract and outcomes of the project. Another thing to do with your partners is ask if they already have large pieces of the grant. Save yourself some time, and whenever you are explaining this, whenever you're writing the grant, if they have pieces that can contribute, don't be afraid to ask them for their input. Lastly, one thing that we've learned is to use partner letters with caution. We've sent out sample support letters, and a lot of times we'll get them back and there'll still be pieces highlighted or pieces missing or not enough information on them. So what I suggest is giving them a letter, a template letter if you need to, but these letters are meant to be specific to their organization and for them to provide actual commitments that will support the grant. So this is another reason why this process and having those partners in place needs to happen very early on in the writing process. As far as budgeting goes, first off, if you have finance staff or people that are strong in finance, they should be working right alongside you and be just as aware of the program side of things as the finance. If awarded, the finance staff are going to be monitoring, invoice, and reporting, and too often I've seen a disconnect between the fiscal and the program staff. But when you're writing, make sure it aligns obviously directly with the work plan that you've established. Always have a plan B and maybe even a C. Throughout the writing, you're going to come across new data and moments of, ooh, we should have this in, but training costs change, COVID happens, staffing transitions happen, new employers move to your area, training programs no longer exist at community colleges, etc. So it's not a bad idea to have a backup plan. Another suggestion, don't guess at anything. Have backup documentation for everything. And obtain that written documentation with anything that's associated to a cost. You might be asked for how you came up with it later, or you may realize that you budgeted for staff at a wage of $20 an hour, but it doesn't align with the market in your area. You may realize that hotel costs are 3 times as expensive as you guesstimated for travel. As far as braiding funding with local, state, and other federal grants, this directly aligns with the video that Alma had showed earlier. We basically combined one of our grants from the Department of labor to this EPA grant, and it works. We provide 13 certifications in environmental related occupations, but instead with our funding, we went behind the walls and we served justice involved individuals. And like you saw in the video, it's just been an amazingly successful grant program. But by braiding funding, you're not only helping with training costs, but you are also increasing the amount of supportive services that we can offer these individuals. This was just kind of a very basic overview grant writing timeline that we all kind of have adopted here. And our first step is to divvy up the sections, document everything, but make sure that everyone is in agreement on that file formatting, where to save the documents. Highly recommend using a shared document. If you use Word and Excel, there's the option to share it so that you only have one. Time and stress management, block off time on your calendars. Most people have other job duties when they're writing these grants and other responsibilities, so just make the time by blocking off your calendars to work on this. Another big section is stress management. And grant writing, it can be fun, but for the most part, it's incredibly stressful. So take care of yourself, work comfortably if you can, and don't forget to take breaks. Caffeine's everyone's best friend while you're writing, but don't forget to drink your water also. As part of the review, like I've seen in several slides, it's a process of review, spell check, revise, review again and again and again. But I do suggest trying not to do this until you're designating meetings, because it's really easy to follow rabbit holes. So yeah, have somebody completely not related to your grant review these, just to make sure that it's clear and concise. And then lastly, submit early. Make sure all of your folders are cleaned up afterwards with only the finals of everything completed that are saved. Keep the backups though, because you probably will need them someday. And then just a last little tip, we keep one folder called retired data that we keep it in for that reason. Lastly, key takeaways, focus on the purpose and the vision of your organization and the corresponding alignment with the grant. Partners and community collaboration is key. Like everyone has said, it is okay and you should ask for help. And lastly, maintain open and transparent communication with your project and grant officers. That's all I have for now. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Haley. Again, great points there. A lot of good takeaways. That file management is huge. I know that's one of the things that's often got me in trouble. Is like, oh, is that the draft that we meant to not work on anymore? So some really good points there. Appreciate that a lot. Next, we are going to move into available technical assistance, and we're going to talk a little bit about what KSU TAB has to offer. Sabina's going to start us out with that, and then we're also going to hear about the new Tic Tacs. So Jeff will be following up Sabine. So Sabine, you go ahead and take over.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. Let me just pull this up here. I think we're going to be here. All right. So I'm Sabina Martin. I'm a TAB partner here at Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. I am the contact for Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska for TAB. I also own Cedra Solutions. So right off the bat, I want to say TAB is not a grantor. We do not provide grants. But we have a lot of services available, free services to communities that feed into grants. And we review the EPA Brownfield grant applications. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about, there it moves, about TAB. So Alma already had that slide up. Just to reiterate, Brownfield, since TAB assistance, technical assistance to Brownfields communities, is a Brownfield related technical assistance service that we provide here. So brownfields are properties, real properties, where the use or the reuse rather may be complicated by the presence or the potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. And that obviously opens up the door really wide as to what can be considered a brownfield. So all communities have brownfields. I have not seen a single community who does not have a brownfield. Usually they have multiples. So here's an example. Main Street, these buildings here can be considered brownfields because they are underutilized, they are potentially contaminated. In this instance, it would be asbestos and lead-based paint based on
the age of the building. You can see here, these windows are boarded up. These are open, so there could be like pigeon poop inside. Excuse me. So all these things can be addressed via EPA Brownfields funds. This is an old school. Most of the communities that we work in have it, and then school consolidation came along. And yeah, nice architecturally nice buildings looking like this. There they sit, vacant, underutilized. They are brownfields because they're underutilized, and a lot of times they have boiler rooms that look like this. So there is a lot of asbestos. You can see all this white stuff here. That's all asbestos. That if that room too cannot be sealed off, has to be remediated, the asbestos that is, and that's kind of expensive. So why would you take these sites on? You know, I mean, they're ugly looking a lot of times. They have environmental issues that might not be exactly cheap to fix. But if you do redevelop a brownfield site, here is a whole bunch of reasons as to why you should do that. Obviously, mitigation of public health and safety concerns is a big reason to do that. That goes straight into writing a grant to the goals of the granting agency, in this case EPA, because that's what they're all about. You know, but there are other things. I mean, basically brownfields, it's economic development with a twist, and that is the environmental twist. So we can help with that. And here are, I mean, I'm just going to introduce the TAB program a little bit more with the slides. It's a national program. So every community in the United States has access to the free services that TAB, the Technical Assistance to Brownfields program, provides. It's communities as well as tribal communities. It's funded by EPA, so K-State TAB is an EPA grantee. Currently, we have 6 TAB providers, and K-State serves all the communities in the states here in that purple coloring here. So we have basically the midsection of the United States. We have a lot of partners, obviously, to do that, and I'll get to that a little bit later as to, you know, what expertise we have. This is the Tribal Tech Assistance Program. I just want to throw that in there. So presentation is already on the website. If you're interested in going a little bit more in depth, you will have it. I already said it's free assistance, so why not use it, right? I mean, it's your tax dollars at work, pretty much. We can help with redevelopment planning, environmental issues, economic development expertise. All of that is there. We have engineers. I'm a hydrogeologist by training. We have economists. We have landscape architects. So we basically have the whole gamut of professions that in one way or the other fit into the brownfield redevelopment project scheme, if you will. Whatever we do is tailored to specific community needs. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach. We usually coordinate through the city, the tribal, or nonprofit brownfields project manager. But we also have worked in the past with grassroots organizations. Communities are accepted on a first-come, first-served basis, depends on the staff and the funding availability. But up to this point, and I've been with TAB for 20 years in various capacities, we never had to turn a community away. So briefly, getting into the services that we can provide. This is the brownfield redevelopment process, pretty much simplified. I mean, you have a brownfield, you plan what you want to do with it, you investigate. By investigate, I mean you're looking at the environmental issues that may be present that you need to remediate, or at least you need to know what's there. And then in the end, you redevelop, right? So breaking this out a little bit more, right? Brownfield identification. You want to tie your brownfields to the redevelopment goals and the planning that you as a community already have. So maybe you have a comp plan, maybe you have a blight study, or maybe there's like a regional planning document, you know. Just make that tie-in for a grant application in this instance. I mean, that's very important. You investigate phase 1, phase 2 site assessments, so they get all the environmental stuff out of the way. Clean up if necessary, if there is contamination there that is above regulatory levels. with 3 and 4, I mean, TAB does not provide environmental services in terms of actually going out there, you know, and taking soil cores or groundwater samples to see what's there. What we can do is we can review the reports that you might get back from an environmental consultant and distill that down into, well, I don't know, depends, like 1, 2, 3 pages, but definitely not 100 pages, the amount of pages that some of these reports are, and put it into layman's terms. So you can take that to a commission meeting and really everybody's on the same page, knowing what is happening at the site and what needs to be done. And then we have, and lastly, the redevelopment of the brownfield site. Again, TAB is not a redeveloper, but we have partners that, for example, can do a market analysis, a feasibility study. They can do a pro forma for a given site. So it kind of feeds into this, right? Identification of brownfields. I mean, there's still some communities out there that we do a lot of workshops, you know, brownfield workshops. And I had that happen several times where I asked the audience, you know, do you have a brownfield site? And some of them just shake their heads. And then at the end, they say, man, you know, yes, I mean, we have this site and we have that site. So yes, I mean, communities do have brownfield sites, and identification is as easy as making an inventory. You can make a list of potential sites. You can write it down, you know, pencil and paper, spreadsheets, GIS, what have you. We at TAB here at K-State, we developed the Brownfield Inventory tool, which is a web-based tool. You can also get it on your phone when you go out, and you basically, it's what I would call, it's a huge Excel spreadsheet where you put the property information in. It later on ties into the EPA acre system, the reporting system that as a grantee you have to abide by. But it's just a list of brownfield sites or potential sites. And then you can use that later on to prioritize your sites, which is a question that's always asked for the grant. You know, how did you come up with these sites? Why have you chosen them? What is the benefit to the community? So it's good to have this. So that is definitely one thing TAB can help with, brownfields inventories and site identification. The other thing that we get asked a lot is to help kind of crystallize the vision for a site, an area, a region, whatever a community wants to address, as far as redevelopment goals are concerned. So we call that visioning. So we get together with the community, you know, and the community provides the venue, they send out the invitations. It's usually anybody who has an interest in this, could be residents, could be like the local government for sure, the chamber, any type of, maybe there's some state agencies or regional agencies that they want to have on board. So anybody comes together and brainstorms as to what the best and highest use of the site would be. And I'll show you some pictures as to how we do that. But here's the opportunity where we mostly work with landscape architects who then can put that vision that the community as a whole through this meeting came up with into a visual rendering. There are some grant applications that allow attachment. EPA grants do not this type of attachment. But you can also use that to garner more community support for a project, right? You can display this visual rendering in the library or wherever, just to make residents aware, and maybe there are some tweaks that you have to make later on too. So you want to set goals and make plans for the redevelopment, get your partners together, review area plans, zoning codes, anything that's relevant to your project. And then later on, you adjust and revise, because a plan is never set in stone, especially a redevelopment plan, because it takes time, and that's something to realize. So with this community engagement tied to redevelopment plans, this is where TAB can help out a lot. So I'm going to show you some slides. What we normally do when we come in to a community, you know, as I said, we work with the community as to the date, the time, the venue, all this good stuff. They invite whoever they want to invite to that meeting, and we work with them. We divide the participants up in groups. They brainstorm. They prioritize their highest 5 priorities as a little group, as a table. They all report out, and then they all get a certain number of dots here, like these colored dots. and then they can put the dots wherever they please, whatever they think is good for the site, for the community, for that area, as far as redevelopment options go. So they can put all their dots behind one option, or they can divide as they see fit. And then we tally all this up, and then a landscape architect works with that to put that into an image. So this is an example from Harrington, Kansas. They just wanted to beautify their main streets. Here we worked with South Dakota State University. That's one of our TAB partners here for the landscape architecture department. And you can see before and after what a huge difference that makes, right? Just kind of putting some greenery in quotes into the picture. This is the former Union Depot in Joplin, Missouri. Some of you might be familiar with that. It's an old depot, really cool looking, I think. That's how it looks today. This is how it used to look like. So the interior is like all gutted, but the community was interested in what to do with this. So the students, again, South Dakota State in this instance, came up with a reuse plan, with a use diagram. They laid it out, and there were some other pictures. I mean, it was a huge report that was generated, but this was a student project that we do with South Dakota State once a year. This is a larger project. The nice thing about that, you get input from different student groups. So they had architects, they had landscape architects, they had interior designers. It pretty much ran the gamut, but nobody actually lived in that town. But everything was, of course, as a student, they were in their 20s, and those viewpoints sometimes differ as far as what can be done, what looks good at the site, what kind of little things you can use that differs sometimes a lot from what we as the older generation think. So you kind of, in the outcome, you pick and choose as the community, of course, what you want to see, right? We also work with K-State landscape architecture and design. So here is a reuse plan that we did for Norfolk, Nebraska. They had a big stock area that they wanted to look at. And here are some of the concept plans that the students came up with. There is an active link that I put in here. So this whole project is available as a story map if you're interested in how that looks like. So we do 2 student projects a year for this reuse planning, the visioning, bigger projects. But in between, we do, a lot of what I would call smaller projects where we just contract with one landscape architect and he or she does the drawings. Communities usually don't have a lot of resources to do the entire redevelopment. So our resource roadmaps are a pretty hot commodity. This is where we put funding together for the redevelopment that might be used. So you have the funding opportunity here, the amount and the match, the program description, the deadline, and then, is it recurring or not, anything special. So that's like, I don't know, depending on the projects, maybe 2 or 3 pages of potential resources that could be used. Also important for a grant application, as is the future redevelopment of a site, right? So here's just a list of TAB servers. It's not complete. I mean, what I would say, if you have a need for something, just call us and ask, even though it's not on this slide, because all we can say is no, and most of the time we don't have to do that. We'll find somebody who can help you out. But here's the Brownfields inventory, the economic feasibility analysis, the planning and the visioning, community outreach. We do a lot of workshops. Could be Brownfields 101, could be solar energy, could be, anything related to redevelopment. Funding sources, that's this resource roadmap. We do review grant applications, and most specifically the EPA grant applications that come out every year. So we have to clean up the assessment, the multi-purpose, the job training. So basically anything brownfield related that EPA puts out. And we developed a grant writing tool called TAB Easy that's available for free on the TAB website. It's password, username protected. Anybody can use it. You need to establish an account, but that's just, as easy as thinking up you put a username together and think up a password and you're in. Lots of hits and tips of how to write a successful grant application. for these types of grants, and some successful grants from the past that are posted there as well. So it's a good resource. I put here, we help finding and evaluating environmental consultants. We will not tell a community, of course, what the consultant they should use, a specific firm or not. It's more like, how do I write an RFP, a request for proposal, for the consultant that I need, right? For the services that I need. Review of plans and technical reports, fact sheets, and information. And here, lastly, other assistance as needed and agreed upon. What I would say, time is always of the essence. It always takes more time than you think to put together a grant application, or, of course, doing a redevelopment project for a brownfield. So it's not like you snap your fingers and bam, you know, miracle, here it comes, and it's done. So always calculate that in. Contact information, if you do want some TAB services, so I'm listed here. For these types of, for Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Michelle is the contact for Iowa, and Jen Clancy basically is the TAB coordinator for the entire EPA Region 7 here. Okay, I mean, that was like a whirlwind tour, but again, if you have questions now, later, just either ask at the very end here or call.
Yep, reach out, let us know. We're happy to connect you as needed and get you to the right spot and to whoever can help you out the best. So thank you, Sabina, for going over the KSU TAB resources that are available to communities. Next up, we have Jeff, and Jeff is going to share some information about the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to join you today. My name is Jeff Severin. I'm a senior program manager leading the Heartland Environmental Justice Center that's based out of the Environmental Finance Center and the Hugo Wall School of Public Affairs at Wichita State University. But I'm joining you today from Lawrence, Kansas. That's where I live and work remotely for the Heartland Environmental Justice Center. And some of our other staff work remotely as well, since we are the center covering EPA Region 7. So we serve communities in Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and adjoining indigenous nations. As Jacob Burney shared last time, we're one of about 17 Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers, or EJ-TIC-TACs, that are funded by the EPA, with some additional support from the Department of Energy. As a regional TIC-TAC, the Heartland EJ Center can provide training and technical assistance to help communities and organizations advance their environmental justice and inter-justice goals, primarily by helping identify and pursue funding opportunities, but also by lending our technical expertise on a range of environmental and topics in community engagement as well. So we talked some before about environmental justice and what that means. I probably won't dive into this given the time, but this is kind of the beginning of the EPA's definition of environmental justice. They go on to talk about engagement with the public as well. I think there's also another great set of EJ principles that was developed by the First National People of Color Environmental Leadership Council back in 1991. There's like 17 principles, but they mostly fall into a couple broad categories that we feel like our approach at the HEJC will follow, and that's that environmental justice involves undoing the harm that's done in the past and rebuilding something new in its place, and making sure that those harms don't occur again by ensuring that those who are most impacted by environmental decisions are part of the decision-making process, planning, implementation processes from the very beginning. And that's a real simplified way of looking at things. We want to make sure that we're aware of that. When we're talking about injustice, it implies that there is some system that's creating that inequality, and our goal is to really work to dig into environmental injustice concerns and really understand kind of the underlying system that's causing those problems, and do what we can to support communities in making meaningful change. So environmental justice is part of the program. We also address energy justice. That's a topic that's even probably maybe less commonly used. I like this definition from the Initiative for Energy Justice, especially that end goal here to make energy accessible, affordable, clean, and democratically managed for all communities. Just like with environmental justice, it's about overcoming those past barriers, the inequities that have led to things like disparities in health outcomes, especially for BIPOC and low-income communities. So putting that into the context of our TIC-TAC, some of the things that DOE would like us to accomplish relate to that transition to green energy for underserved, disadvantaged communities, which includes looking at how do we finance some of these transitions and build collaboration with industry and others that are part of this process. And this is especially for rural and remote areas, as well as land that's either on existing or former mine lands. So our goal is really to focus on the communities first, understanding and learning as much as we can, acting first as a listener to gather information, understand what the concerns of the community are, and not come in with solutions, but to work alongside folks and help them achieve what their goals are for the community. When we start working with a community, it's important that we recognize that we aren't the experts on that community, that the people living in those communities are the experts. We're just there to help build on that capacity, help draw out that expertise, and hopefully convert that into funding for environmental and energy justice projects. Once we've reached that point, we can provide a range of training and technical assistance. That might include just training on grant writing and management, similar to this, helping with providing training on how to do a community needs assessment so that you can dig in a little bit deeper into your communities, as well as thinking about leadership development and civic engagement. So that might look like training on how to engage with the local community to learn more. It also might look like working with your local government to help them understand the best ways to engage with the community. From there, we can also provide a range of technical assistance. A lot of that will focus on grant development, of course. And that's really walking alongside folks to help through that grant writing process. Again, we can't write grants for people, but we can sure help throughout the whole process, from getting registered on sam.gov to developing the basic concepts, understanding what a logic model looks like and how to develop that successfully, bringing in some of our expertise in particular environmental areas or engineering, whatever we can do to help you develop the most successful proposal. And that could happen over a series of calls. It could happen in kind of some live workshops or office hours where we just kind of walk through those sections of a grant that you're working on with you, provide real-time feedback, or it could be over a longer period of time to just kind of start developing those concepts so that when you reach that point where you're ready to apply, you feel prepared, you have language that you can use, and pretty quickly put together a proposal in response to an announcement. We also can do things that are more focused on education and outreach. So we've got, if that's what the community that you're working in needs, to better inform folks about what's happening, get them engaged in conversations, we can provide services like that as well. And then, this is kind of a, not necessarily a roadmap, but a little bit of another way of looking at that. If you've already know your concerns, we can start from there, or we can help conduct an assessment to really get a better understanding of what's happening in the community. We can work from solutions you've already identified, or help you prioritize and identify those solutions. We can kind of walk through a planning process to really help piece all that together, and then start to identify which funding sources make the most sense to pursue for those projects. From there, helping with that whole grant process, and once you hopefully successfully have acquired that funding, helping you set up the processes you'll need to manage that funding. It's not our goal to just kind of get started with something and then disappear, but to really work through that whole process and be a support once you're in that implementation phase as well. So who's providing all these services? Well, we kind of have a bit of a hub and spoke system, I guess, with the EJ Center as a call center and core service provider. We have currently 4 dedicated staff, or roughly 4 dedicated staff. We've got one program manager that splits her time between the EJ Center and the Environmental Finance Center, but we can also draw on the expertise of folks within the EFC to provide that training and technical assistance. We're going to be hiring one more community program coordinator. We have 2 on staff right now, and then looking at hiring community engagement coordinators in communities where we need to do some deeper work. So if there's kind of communities where you're experiencing a large number of EJ and environmental or energy justice concerns, locating someone that's working in the community, that lives in those communities, that understands the challenges and can work closely with community members and organizations in that area. Beyond our staff, we have a partner of a network of 8 other organizations, and I'll share that list with you here shortly. And then the final piece is our accountability board, which we're going to be developing kind of through the early part of 2024. We hope to have that in place, but that's going to be made up of people from those impacted communities who are trusted voices that represent some of the unique needs and the diversity of our region. And I think this group will especially be important as we begin connecting with communities, ensure that we aren't creating any more harm than good, that we are engaging with folks in meaningful ways that respect the community and customs and cultures as we're engaging with folks throughout the region. Finally, here's just our list of partners. The Kansas State University, there is their engineering extension, but that includes the Kansas Energy Program, the Kansas Radon Program, the Pollution Prevention Institute, and KSU TAB. So we're working across multiple multiple organizations that are helping with getting the word out about the center, providing direct technical assistance. Community Engineering Corps and the Environmental Protection Network work with several of the TIC-TACs across the nation, providing free support from either an engineering perspective or the EPN has a lot of retired or previous employees of the EPA that have a range of technical experience and can provide just input on kind of the technical information that you might want to include in your grants. I ran through that real quick because I wanted to be respectful of folks' time, but here's our contact information. The best way to, if you're looking for support and feel like we'd be a good place to tap into, the best thing to do is go to that heartlandej.org website. We have a contact us form there that goes to our whole team, so we can do some evaluation, get you connected with the best potential service provider or one of our staff.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeff, for that overview of the Tic Tac Center, and a lot of exciting things going on and resources out there for all of you communities and that are looking for various programs and help and assistance. Just know that there is so much out there to help you. So we're anxious to do that, as are everybody who is on our panels. I just wanted to thank everybody who did present today. Again, we really appreciate all of the information that was presented. As we kind of wrap up here, if there are any questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat. We are going to also have, I'm going to share very quickly here. We do have, as with all of our sessions with KSU TAB, the opportunity to share feedback on this session. And so hopefully, let's see, Sabine, tell me if you're seeing that. But we do have a
yeah, it's up. Yeah,
there we go.
Dana also put the link in the chat.
Perfect. Yes.
There
so
you go.
Go ahead and scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat. Provide us with the feedback on this session and the previous sessions, or things that you'd like to see us provide additional information and resources on. So we appreciate everybody's time today to participate in this session, and again to all the speakers. And information will be uploaded. The PowerPoint presentations are already uploaded, and a recording will be uploaded early next week. So check those other ones if you weren't able to watch them, and keep us updated with things that you are needing as community. And I'm looking to see if we have any other questions. If anybody does, please go ahead and throw those in the chat. Otherwise, I think that is the end of our session for today.